My name is Ben McKenzie. I'm the Fractional AI Officer for 1584 Design, and today I want to talk to you about automating project creation for interior design using AI. And I'm going to cover in this video a common point of friction in the fulfillment process, specifically around setting up new projects and onboarding new projects, and how to use AI to automate that process to remove that friction. And then along the way, I'm going to teach you a reusable pattern for AI architecture that you can use anytime you've got multiple applications in your stack and they have to kind of talk to each other. Now, this build I'm going to show you is grounded in a real problem we ran into in 1584, and that's that the designer bought items for a project, but she couldn't log them because the operator hadn't created that project in the software that we made for 1584. So the goal is, whenever a new contract is signed by a client, we want to automatically create the project and the associated invoices in that software I mentioned so that everything is set up before the designer needs it, and also so that the operator doesn't have to be a part of that process. And you might be asking, this sounds like kind of a small build. Why would you bother automating that? If you've watched our other videos, you probably know that we like to think in terms of constraints. We want to carefully consider whether or not it's worth building each thing that we're using AI to improve efficiency for. And the filter we use is, does this build solve our current constraint? And typically, a constraint in your business is going to fall into one of two categories. Either you have a constraint on the acquisition side, which means you need more leads, or you need to convert more prospects into clients during your sales calls. Some aspect of acquisition needs to be optimized so you get more clients. It means you have more capacity on your team than you have demand for your services. On the other side, you have a fulfillment constraint, which means that you have more demand for your services than you can handle, than you can fulfill on. And in 1584's case, right now we are a little bit constrained in terms of how many projects 1584 can support at one time. So we're constrained on the fulfillment side. Now, all of this is relevant because if you look at a build like I'm going to show you, you might say, that's not going to make it so that you can support 2, 3, 4 more projects per year all by itself. And that would be true, but what you'll find when you start using AI is that sometimes you don't have to fix a constraint with a single build in one shot. Sometimes you want to add up little builds that give you small efficiency gains so that together they make a meaningful difference. So that's what we're doing here, and specifically, we want to reduce friction in the designer's process so she can stay focused on design. And then on the operator's side, we want to offload low skill work onto AI so that the operator can focus on more important things. This is the architecture for the build. And if you're looking at this and you're like, I have no idea what this means, don't worry about it. You don't really have to. I'm going to explain the big picture of what's going on, and then I'm going to mention some specific details in case you're more technical. Now, you can see that this is a pretty linear workflow, and it starts in an application called High Level. 1584 uses High Level for marketing stuff, sales stuff, and also for documents and contracts. And what's cool about High Level is that you can build workflows in it. So anytime that a new contract is signed in High Level, this workflow is going to be triggered, and a payload for the contract is going to be sent to an application called Cloudflare. What it's going to do is basically hand that data from High Level to the operator's computer. And we use some infrastructure to make that happen. We need to make sure that there's a webhook URL that High Level can send the data packet to. And then we send that data packet through a tunnel to a listener on the operator's Mac. We created this program on the operator's Mac for them. And then that listener is going to hand the data off to a receiver that's going to build the prompt and invoke an AI agent via the Claude Code CLI. It's kind of a version of Claude that runs in the background that you can access programmatically to spin up a new agent. So a lot of that probably sounded super technical, and it kind of was, and you don't need to worry about it. You don't need to understand what it means. You just need to know that if you have something that starts in High Level, you need to make sure that there's an automated process to trigger code that sends data through whatever infrastructure is required. And what I've shown you here is a really good one. It's simple and clean. Sends that data to wherever it is that you run AI agents. Some people run their agents in the cloud. I think there are really strong reasons to run your AI agents on a single computer, and I'll touch on those in a little bit. But in this architecture, we're sending the contract data to an agent on the computer, and we're automatically going to spin up that agent, and then it's going to receive a prompt from this receiver. And that prompt is going to say, use a particular skill, which we've already created for the operator. We put it on their machine. It's going to say, use this skill to create a new project in Ledger. That's the custom software we created for 1584 for managing their projects. Create a new project in Ledger, and also create in that project all of the invoices that are specified in the contract. In order to do that, the agent's going to need to use a connector So we're going to use, in this case, an MCP server as a connector that lets the agent directly use Ledger's API. So anyway, the agent's going to create the project, create the invoices through this path, and then it's also going to log everything it does so that if anything goes wrong, we can ask the agent to look into its own session logs and troubleshoot, because you don't want to be doing that. You know, if you're an operator, or if, you know, in our case, we're supporting an operator, we want to make it as easy as possible and as quick as possible to get things up and running if there's ever an issue. So that's why we have these session logs here. So I know that there were probably some unfamiliar terms in my description of this architecture, but it's conceptually simple. Things start in high level where we get our documents processed, our contracts processed. The data gets sent to the operator's computer where agents get rented from Anthropic, in this case, through Claude. And so that agent that gets rented from Anthropic to do this work, it's going to plug a skill in that tells it how to do the work. And then it's going to use a connector to do that work in the project management software directly. And so the result of that architecture I just showed you is a clean process where when a new contract is signed, the project and the associated invoices are created automatically. And that's good because that means that the designer isn't going to hit a roadblock when she goes to log transactions or items that she's purchased or that she's putting in a particular space, so that she can focus on design, which is where she should be focused. It's what she does best. We want to get everything else out of the way, right? And the operator benefits because they don't have to waste time on low skill activities, and instead they can focus on higher value activities that really move the needle for your business. Now, earlier I said that I would let you know why we chose this architecture versus others, because we could have built this in the cloud. That's the main alternative here. We created this architecture so that agents would run on the operator's computer instead of in the cloud. And the reason has to do with what we call the AIOS. And if you've watched our video on the AIOS, you know that the purpose of it is to make it as easy as possible for somebody who's not super technical to use AI. And AIOS has a few pieces that I'm not going to go into, but there are a few benefits to using the AIOS. The first is that when we do this work through the AIOS on the operator's computer, we take advantage of subsidized token pricing that is associated with subscriptions. Because if you just use a company like Anthropic's API, it's going to cost a lot more per token than if you have a max subscription that costs like $100, $200. If you get the low level one, the cost savings aren't as great, but with the higher tier ones, you save a lot of money. It's like 10x at the time of this video. We want to be cost conscious to a reasonable extent when we do this stuff. And so if we can do something a lot cheaper, then we should do it that way. So generally speaking, it's good to have systems that can run off of your subscription. And the way you have to do that right now is everything runs on a computer. What's also good about that is that when we help people do this, we set up your AIOS, and depending on the scope of our work together, we'll create all of the connectors that your agents are going to need to talk to your other systems, the other apps that you use in your business already. And so if that stuff is already set up on the computer, we want to take advantage of that infrastructure and not recreate it in the cloud. And then third, there's this thing called your business OS that captures all the information about how your business runs, and it includes important assets like templates, brand files, etc., that AI needs to do a good job when you give it a task. It also has access to all of that when we run all of these jobs on the operator's computer that already has the AIOS. And then the final thing has to do with maintainability and ease of use. What you really want is a situation where one person owns AI at your company and they get fluent. And even if the rest of your employees use AI, you have one person who kind of manages everything centrally. And they have to do that through an interface. And it requires a lot more of someone technically to go into these cloud platforms and understand what is happening and make sense of what's going on. Whereas chances are your operator already uses a computer to do their work. And so they can just keep doing that with another program, which is Claude Desktop, ChatGPT Desktop, Codex, whatever it is that you guys use. And in our case, we typically work with Claude Desktop. So it's easier to maintain your systems if they all live in one place and that place feels familiar. And as you add more and more AI employees, like this little AI employee that we're building here that I showed you the architecture for, then you want to be able to maintain them in one place. So if we take a step back, we can identify a generalizable pattern that is going to be useful for other workflows from the really specific workflow we looked at. So if we look at this is for a specific use case. We had a certain skill, we had a certain trigger, and then we had a certain thing that we wanted to do using that skill. The generalizable pattern is if you have some kind of an app, like a source app, and you have a triggering event in that app, that trigger will kick off a process that sends data through a tunnel service onto your operator's computer, where a prompt will get built and an AI agent is going to get called. And then that agent is going to use the skill that's appropriate for the task at hand. And there's a good chance that it's going to need to do something in another tool that you use, and it has to use a connector in order to do those things, use those tools in the other app. This kind of grayed out styling here, this is stuff that you can swap out. This is stuff that's going to be pretty consistent. So when I made this build for 1584, it made it so that in the future, if we have to do something similar, we have really good infrastructure to build on, and that creates speed and efficiency. And speed and efficiency when it comes to AI, that's what's going to give you disproportionate market share because you can move faster than your competition. So zooming even farther out, I want to leave you with three things. The first thing is that from a strategic standpoint, if you add up a bunch of little efficiency gains by solving problems with AI, even though each one is small, they can add up to really meaningful differences in your business. Second, what you're going to find is that there are common architectures across problems that share characteristics. And so when you solve one problem in your business, if you do it in a smart way, it makes it so that when you solve a similar problem, you can do it a lot faster because you can just clone the thing you already have and then swap out a couple of pieces and you're done, instead of having to build a bunch of stuff from scratch every time. And then finally, I want to talk about the AIOS and Business OS. And if you haven't watched the video on the AIOS, I'm going to put a link to that video below in the description. But kind of like what I was saying about architecture, when you solve one problem, you can kind of piggyback on that architecture. You add, clone it, swap out a couple of pieces, and you get efficiency gains by doing that kind of duplication, that templating. The AIOS, it gives you the same efficiency gains, but the idea here is that this is the core foundation of all of your AI systems. This is the thing that you want in place so that it's as easy as possible to add AI. Your connectors are in place, your platform is in place, your business OS is in place. Whenever you're solving a problem, you want to make sure that once you put your AIOS in place, the architecture you choose actually uses that AIOS. You'd be surprised by how often people will put a ton of effort into building a really strong foundation for themselves, and then they'll make something that totally bypasses that foundation. I'm basically saying, don't do that. Create an AIOS for yourself or hire someone to create your AIOS and then use it. So, to recap, small builds are worth doing as long as they work towards a common constraint. Be thoughtful about your architecture so you can reuse it. And then finally, build on top of your AIOS so that all of your AI work compounds and you can do things faster and easier, because speed and efficiency are the two things that are going to let you capture a bigger market share, because they're going to let you get ahead of your competition.